October 14th, 1943. An SS officer walks into a tailor shop inside Sobibor death camp. He's here for a leather jacket, stolen from a murdered prisoner that morning. He admires himself in the mirror. Behind him, the Jewish tailor quietly locks the door. Two prisoners step from the shadows, each gripping a hatchet. Before the Nazi can turn, the first axe swings. A wet crack. His skull splits open. 1 down, 10 to go. In the next 60 minutes, these starving prisoners will attempt to silently assassinate every SS officer in the camp. 11 men, one by one, in 15-minute intervals. Then 600 inmates will march out the front gate together. No guns, no outside help, just axes, knives, and a timetable written from memory. And the most insane part? The plan is working until 4:50 p.m. when the deadliest guard in the camp is still alive and prowling the yard. How do unarmed prisoners hunt 11 Nazis? And what breaks the plan at 4:50 p.m.? October 1943. Sobibor's gas chambers had already killed an estimated 250,000 people. Sobibor wasn't a prison camp. It was an extermination center, a factory engineered for one purpose: murdering human beings at industrial speed. Hidden in a remote Polish forest 60 miles from the nearest city, surrounded by swampland that swallowed sound and hope alike, it processed trainloads of Jewish families from across Nazi-occupied Europe. The operation ran with mechanical efficiency. Trains arrived at a fake railway station, complete with flower boxes and a painted clock frozen at 6 o'clock. Passengers disembarked believing they'd reached a labor camp. Within 3 hours, nearly everyone was dead, gassed with carbon monoxide pumped from captured Soviet tank engines, their bodies burned in open-air pits, their ashes raked into the sandy soil. The entire process, from arrival to cremation, took less time than a feature film. The only prisoners kept alive were the Sonderkommando, a rotating slave workforce of roughly 600 men and women forced to operate the killing machinery. They sorted victims' clothing into neat piles for shipment back to Germany. They extracted gold teeth from corpses with pliers. They shoveled ash and bone fragments into mass graves. And every few months, the Nazis executed them too, replacing them with fresh arrivals who hadn't yet witnessed too much. Living on borrowed time doesn't capture it. Every Sonderkommando knew their job came with an expiration date stamped in bullets. Escape seemed impossible. 3 concentric fences of barbed wire ringed the camp, the outer 2 electrified with enough voltage to kill on contact. A minefield surrounded the outer perimeter, seeded with anti-personnel explosives designed to shred legs and torsos. Guard towers studded every corner, manned by Ukrainian auxiliaries with MG-34 machine guns covering every meter of open ground. Beyond the minefield lay swampy forest crawling with German patrols and Polish collaborators eager to collect bounties on escaped Jews. Previous escape attempts had ended in mass executions. One group tunneled for weeks beneath the barracks, hit a buried mine, and died in a hail of bullets. Another handful slipped away during a forest work detail. Most were hunted down within 48 hours, their bodies displayed in the roll call yard as a warning. The message was absolute. Sobibor was a one-way door. You entered upright, you left as smoke. But by autumn 1943, doing nothing was even deadlier. Rumors spread through the barracks in terrified whispers. The Nazis were liquidating the remaining death camps to destroy evidence before the advancing Red Army arrived. Treblinka had been dismantled in August, its surviving workers shot and buried in the same pits they'd filled with victims. Belzec was already bulldozed, planted over with crops. Sobibor was next. The prisoners knew what liquidation meant. Mass graves dug just outside the fence, a bullet in the back of the head, then silence forever. Escape wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was the only alternative to certain executions. On September 23, 1943, a transport from Minsk rattled into Sobibor's rail siding. Of the 2,000 Jewish deportees aboard, nearly all were marched directly to the gas chambers within the hour. But 80 young men were pulled aside for the work squads, strong bodies needed to replace prisoners who died from exhaustion or been executed for minor infractions. Among them stood a tall, battle-scarred Soviet Army lieutenant named Alexander Pechersky. called Sasha by his men. Sasha was a 34-year-old Jewish officer who'd been captured at the Battle of Vyazma in October 1941. He'd survived 2 years of Nazi POW camps, multiple escape attempts, brutal interrogations, and a death march through occupied Belarus. He arrived at Sobibor with a soldier's discipline, a strategist's mind, and one fixed idea. He would not die passively. Leon Feldhendler noticed him immediately. Feldhendler was a 32-year-old Polish Jew, the former head of the Judenrat in Zolkiv, who'd been secretly organizing a resistance cell inside the camp for months. He had courage, contacts among the work details, and a burning will to act, but no military training. His previous escape plans had collapsed for lack of tactical knowledge. Now, watching Sasha move through the barracks with the posture of a man who'd commanded troops under artillery fire, Feldhendler saw the missing piece. That night, after the guards locked the barracks and the compound fell into uneasy darkness, Feldhendler approached Sasha. They spoke in whispers, faces inches apart, while Ukrainian sentries paced outside the thin wooden walls. "We've tried everything," Feldhendler admitted, his voice barely audible. "Tunnels, bribery, cutting the wire. Nothing works." Sasha studied him for a long moment, his eyes reflecting the faint moonlight through a crack in the boards. Then he answered, "You haven't tried killing them." In that instant, something shifted. The dreamer had met the soldier. Within 72 hours, they would begin planning the largest death camp uprising in history. What neither man knew was that fate would force them to execute it 3 weeks early, ready or not. What kind of plan could possibly work against armed guards, minefields, and machine gun towers? And why would removing 2 specific Nazis from the camp accelerate everything by 72 hours? Sasha Pechersky spent his first week at Sobibor doing reconnaissance. He memorized guard rotations, which towers changed shift at which hours, which sentries smoked cigarettes and looked away. He counted rifles, estimated ammunition stores, mapped the fences, the gates, the blind spots between watchtowers where a running man might survive for 30 meters. And he noticed something the long-term prisoners had stopped seeing. The SS officers at Sobibor had grown fat and sloppy. These Nazis treated the death camp like a private luxury resort. They wore wristwatches looted from murdered deportees. They drank confiscated vodka and French cognac every night in the officers' mess. They strutted around in tailored coats, stripped from victims' luggage, admiring themselves in mirrors while 600 prisoners starved on watery soup. Greed had made them careless. They wandered the camp unarmed, trusting the fences and towers to do their killing for them. And Sasha realized he could weaponize that greed against them. The plan he devised with Feldhendler was brilliantly simple and horrifyingly risky. They would lure SS officers into isolated workshops one by one, using the Nazis' own appetite for stolen goods as bait. Word would spread that special items had arrived on the latest transport. A beautiful leather coat in the tailor shop, hand-stitched cavalry boots at the cobbler's, a gold pocket watch in the sorting depot. Each officer would receive a personal invitation to come collect his prize at a specific time, and each officer would walk into an ambush. If you're finding this story gripping, do me a favor, hit subscribe. This channel uncovers the most unbelievable true stories from history, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, back to Sobibor, where the clock is about to start ticking. The conspirators created a kill schedule with 15-minute intervals, timed to a salvaged pocket watch hidden in the carpentry shed. 4 p.m. Acting Commandant Niemann arrives at the tailor shop for his leather jacket. 4:15 p.m. Untersturmführer Josef Wolf visits the cobbler for custom boots. 4:30 p.m. Rudolf Beckmann enters the sorting warehouse for a gold watch, and so on through 11 targets. By 5 p.m., when the daily roll call would force all prisoners to assemble in the main yard, most of Sobibor's German leadership would be dead. The conspirators would cut phone lines, disable the camp's generator if possible, and decapitate the chain of command in a single hour of silent violence. Then came the most audacious part, the escape itself. At roll call, 600 prisoners would line up as usual, feigning normalcy. On Sasha's signal, They would march toward the main gate in formation, as if departing for an external work detail. Without their German superiors barking orders, the Ukrainian tower guards might hesitate, confused by the sudden mass movement. If everything went perfectly, the entire camp might simply walk out the front gate before anyone realized what was happening. It was a long shot measured in seconds and blood, but it was the only shot they had. By early October, the conspirators had assembled their hit list, recruited their executioners from the most trusted prisoners, and hidden weapons throughout the camp. Hatchets from the carpentry shed, knives forged from scrap metal in the blacksmith's forge, 2 rifles and a pistol smuggled from the armory under a drunken guard's nose. They set the date, October 17th. Then, on October 13th, everything accelerated. Prisoners working near the administration building overheard devastating news. Commandant Franz Reichleitner had left the camp for a trip to Germany. Even more astonishing, his deputy Gustav Wagner, the most sadistic officer in Sobibor, known for shooting prisoners at random during roll call, for crushing skulls with a shovel, for selecting children for the gas chambers with a smile, was also absent. The 2 most dangerous men in the camp were gone simultaneously. This was either a gift or a trap. Sasha made the call within hours. They would strike tomorrow. October 14th. The power vacuum wouldn't last. If they waited for the 17th, Reichleitner or Wagner might return, and the opportunity would evaporate. Ready or not, the revolt was now 20 hours away. That night, whispered orders rippled through the barracks like an electric current. Knives were sharpened on concrete. Assignments were confirmed with nods and hand signals. Sasha briefed his team leaders on every detail. Where each Nazi would be killed, who would wield the hatchets, how to signal across the camp when the march began. Sleep was impossible. By dawn, either they would be free or they would all be dead. At 3:45 p.m. on October 14th, someone severed the telephone line connecting Sobibor to the outside world with a pair of pliers stolen from the mechanic's shed. Prisoners drifted to their positions in workshops across the camp, hearts hammering against ribs. In the tailor shop, 2 men tested the weight of their hatchets one final time. Then, right on schedule, Johann Niemann appeared at the door, ready to claim his new coat. He walked into an execution chamber and never walked out. But the timetable was built on perfect silence, and silence, in a camp full of nervous prisoners and paranoid guards, is almost impossible to maintain. How long before someone notices 11 missing officers? And what happens when the deadliest Nazi in Sobibor refuses to show up for his scheduled death? 4 p.m. Niemann enters the tailor shop. 4 minutes later, he's dead on the floor, his skull split by a hatchet. Prisoners drag his body behind a curtain, pile coats over the corpse, and scatter sawdust across the blood. Outside, the afternoon continues undisturbed. 1 down, 10 to go. 4:15 p.m. Untersturmführer Josef Wolf strolls into the cobbler's hut, expecting custom boots fitted to measurements taken the previous week. A prisoner steps behind him and drives a blade across his throat before he can turn. 2 men catch his collapsing body, carry it to a back room, and drape a canvas tarp over the spreading pool of red. The cobbler resumes his work at the bench, hands trembling, but face blank. 2 down. 4:30 p.m. SS officer Rudolf Beckmann enters the sorting warehouse, eager to collect a gold pocket watch spotted in the morning's haul. A young Jewish prisoner named Yehuda Lerner lunges from behind a shelf and buries a makeshift knife in his chest. Beckmann falls across a pile of stolen clothing, his blood soaking into fabric, stripped from people he helped murder. His body is rolled beneath a sorting table and covered with coats. 3 down. Over the next 30 minutes, the killings continue in grim sequence. In the carpentry shed, a Ukrainian collaborator is strangled from behind and stabbed through the kidney. In the storage depot, 2 more German officers are axed while examining confiscated binoculars, their bodies stuffed into empty crates. In the garage, another Nazi is bludgeoned with a hammer while inspecting a captured motorcycle. Each time, the rebels work frantically to conceal the evidence, shoving corpses behind racks of clothing, under piles of lumber, into drainage ditches. The workshops become makeshift morgues. The air smells of sawdust, leather, and copper. By 4:45 p.m., at least 9 German SS officers lie dead, plus several of their most brutal Ukrainian auxiliaries. With every kill, the prisoners seize weapons from the bodies: Luger pistols, Mauser rifles, ammunition belts, even a few stick grenades. Men who woke up that morning with nothing but wooden spoons now grip loaded German firearms, their hands slick with their enemy's blood. The balance of power is shifting, barely, invisibly, but shifting. Yet every passing minute multiplies the danger. Hiding one body is manageable. Hiding a dozen is a logistical nightmare balanced on razor wire. In one workshop, a prisoner assassin can't move a corpse in time for the next scheduled arrival, so he props the dead Nazi upright in a chair, hat tilted low over the ruined face as if napping off a heavy lunch. In another, a rebel mops furiously at a blood trail creeping toward the open doorway, while a guard smokes a cigarette 10 feet away, oblivious. It's a macabre juggling act. Kill, hide, clean, smile, kill again. Outside in the yards, hundreds of prisoners continue their routines, raking leaves into piles, splitting firewood, hauling bundles of sorted clothing while stealing terrified glances toward the workshops. They see SS officers enter the buildings. They don't see them come out. The tension is suffocating, a pressure building behind every eye. One wrong word, one nervous twitch, one guard who wonders why he hasn't seen Niemann in an hour, and everything explodes. Then, at 4:50 p.m., the plan hits its first catastrophic snag. SS Oberscharführer Karl Frenzel, one of the cruelest guards in the camp, responsible for countless beatings and executions, known to kill prisoners for sport, is still alive. He was supposed to be dead by now, lured to the carpentry shop and killed like the others. But Frenzel never showed up for his appointment. He's somewhere in the camp, pistol on his hip, entirely unaware that his colleagues are being butchered around him. Maybe he got distracted by paperwork. Maybe a sixth sense kept him away. Whatever the reason, Frenzel is now a roaming wild card with 10 minutes left until roll call. If he notices the missing officers, if he stumbles onto a body, if he sees a speck of blood on someone's cuff, the alarm goes up and 600 prisoners face machine gun fire in an open yard. 10 minutes. 11 confirmed kills, 1 living Nazi who can destroy everything, and the clock is still ticking toward 5. What finally breaks the silence? And when the shooting starts, how does anyone survive a minefield designed to shred human bodies into fragments? 4:55 p.m., 5 minutes before roll call. A sharp whistle shrieks across the compound, followed by the camp siren's wailing scream. Someone has found a body, or noticed a severed phone line, or simply registered the impossible absence of every German officer. The careful deception shatters in a single breath. SS Unterscharführer Erich Bauer, returning from an errand at a nearby village, stumbles onto a corpse behind the sorting depot, an officer's boot protruding from beneath a canvas tarp. He yanks his pistol and opens fire on the nearest group of prisoners, screaming in German. In the same heartbeat, Karl Frenzel spots the chaos and sprints toward a watchtower, bellowing, "Aufstand! Aufstand! Uprising!" The quiet phase is over. Now it's war. Sasha Pechersky doesn't hesitate. He vaults onto a wooden table in the assembly yard, facing hundreds of terrified prisoners who've frozen mid-step. His voice cuts through the gunfire like a blade. "Comrades, forward, to the gate!" For one suspended second, no one moves. 600 people stand paralyzed between hope and death. Then his words detonate. A roar erupts from the crowd, a sound Sobibor has never heard, the collective scream of the condemned choosing to fight, and the mass charge begins. Prisoners drop their rakes, their brooms, their bundles of stolen clothing. They run, all of them, toward the main gate, the side fences, any breach in the wire. A handful of rebels fire captured rifles at the watchtowers. One Nazi sniper topples from his perch, hit in the chest by a lucky shot. Another tower guard ducks, pinned by suppressing fire for 5 critical seconds. It's enough. The first wave reaches the inner perimeter fence and crashes against the barbed wire in a human flood. Karl Frenzel reaches a heavy MG-34 machine gun mounted on the nearest tower and opens fire. The weapon chatters at 900 rounds per minute, stitching lines of death across the yard. Prisoners collapse in rows, cut apart as they run. But the mass behind them doesn't stop. They climb over the falling bodies, clawing at the wire, hacking with hatchets and bare hands. Some tear their palms to bloody ribbons, ripping the barbed strands apart. The machine gun keeps hammering. Bodies pile against the fence, and still they keep coming. At the main gate, a cluster of prisoners overwhelms two stunned guards, wrestling them to the ground. A captured Mauser rifle becomes a club, then a key. Someone searches the dead guards' pockets frantically for the padlock key, but Frenzel's machine gun finds them. The gate team scatters or dies. The survivors redirect toward a breach in the side fence where prisoners have finally torn a gap wide enough to crawl through. In 5 minutes of carnage, the inner perimeter is breached. Ragged figures pour through gaps in the wire, stumbling into the no man's land beyond. Ahead lies the tree line, 200 meters of flat, sandy ground and then the forest. Freedom, survival, testimony. Between them and those trees lies the minefield. The first prisoners to sprint across the open sand pay with their lives. A deafening blast, a geyser of dirt and blood, and the leading runner vanishes, torn apart by a buried mine. Another explosion to the left, another to the right. Bodies cartwheel through the air. Screams blend with the endless crack of rifle fire from the towers behind. And still they run. Because stopping means certain death. Because the only path forward is through. In an act of harrowing calculation, the second wave follows the craters. They sprint across ground already torn open by the first explosions, gambling that detonated mines won't detonate twice. Some run directly over the bodies of the fallen, using the dead as gruesome stepping stones across soil that might still conceal more charges. It's a nightmare image. Survivors literally climbing over their own people to reach the trees. But in this calculus of horror, even the dead are helping the living escape. Somehow, it works. Dozens reach the forest, then scores, then hundreds, gasping, bleeding, weeping, but free. Behind them, the machine guns keep firing, cutting down stragglers even as they disappear into the undergrowth. Perhaps half of those who charged the fence lie dead in the yard, in the minefield, at the wire. But against every probability, roughly 300 men and women break out of Sobibor that afternoon. The survivors scatter into the forest, splitting into small groups to evade pursuit. Some link up with Soviet partisan units operating behind German lines and continue fighting until liberation. Others hide in Polish farmhouses, in haystacks, in holes dug beneath barn floors, surviving on scraps and silence. The Nazis launch a massive manhunt with hundreds of SS troops, Wehrmacht soldiers, and local police. Over the following days and weeks, many escapees are recaptured and shot, but many are not. Approximately 50 Sobibor survivors will live to see Allied victory in May 1945. 50 witnesses to a crime the Nazis tried to erase from history. The consequences of October 14th rippled far beyond that Polish forest. For the first time, prisoners had not merely defied a Nazi extermination camp, they had effectively destroyed it from within. An enraged Heinrich Himmler, architect of the Holocaust, ordered Sobibor liquidated immediately. The remaining prisoners who missed the escape, those in the isolated Camp 3 section who never received word of the uprising, were executed on the spot and buried in mass graves. Then SS demolition teams bulldozed the entire facility. Gas chambers, barracks, fences, guard towers, rail siding. They paved the site with asphalt, planted crops over the mass graves, and eventually seeded pine trees to camouflage the terrain. On official German maps, Sobibor ceased to exist. The Nazis believed they had buried their crime forever. They were wrong. Sasha Pechersky survived the war, escaped through the forest to Soviet partisan lines, and eventually rejoined the Red Army to fight until Berlin fell. He spent decades afterward battling Soviet authorities who wanted to suppress the specifically Jewish nature of the Holocaust, fighting to have Sobibor's story told. Leon Feldhendler survived the escape but was murdered by anti-Semitic Polish nationalists in Lublin in April 1945, just days before Germany's final surrender. The other survivors scattered across the world, to Israel, America, Australia, but they testified at war crimes trials, wrote memoirs, gave interviews, and ensured that 250,000 voices would not be silenced by Nazi bulldozers. In the end, the prisoners' greatest weapon wasn't smuggled rifles or sharpened hatchets. It was the understanding that their tormentors had grown lazy, and the courage to exploit that weakness in a single, irreversible hour. They turned Nazi greed into a trap. They transformed a death factory into an execution ground for its own operators. And they proved that even in the darkest machinery of genocide, resistance remained possible. The pine trees at Sobibor still stand today, whispering above soil that holds 250,000 murdered souls. But thanks to a Soviet officer, a Polish organizer, and 600 prisoners who refused to die quietly, those whispers carry a story the killers never wanted told. The revolt at Sobibor wasn't the only time prisoners escaped a death camp. A similar thing happened at Stalag Luft 3, but this time it involves tunneling from inside a gym horse.